I think Strange New Worlds is at a crossroads. Not because it's failing, not because it's out of ideas, not because the cast forgot how to act or the crew forgot how to shoot television. It's subtler. Season 1 felt like science fiction, real science fiction, a what-if premise first. Then you watch professionals deal with the consequences and the meaning shows up because it has to. Season 2 starts stretching and sometimes it nails it. Season 3, that's where I start feeling the show look in the mirror a little too often. And if that's what's happening, Season 4 is either where the show tightens back up or it turns into the drift. It turns that into an identity. So I want to put one standard on the table early because everything I'm about to say hangs on it. Is the episode built around a moral problem or is it built around a clever idea? That's it. That's the test. If the moral problem comes first, you can wrap it in any genre you want. Comedy, horror, courtroom drama, musical. It still feels like Star Trek. If the clever idea comes first, the episode can be entertaining, even impressive, but it starts to feel like Star Trek acting like Star Trek. And that is where franchises get thin. Season 4 hasn't started yet. This is the last moment where it's worth calling it out before we're just reacting from week to week. What's up, my know-it-alls? This isn't a Season 4 review. There's nothing to review yet. It's more of a pre-flight check, a look back at what Strange New Worlds has been across its first 3 seasons, what it was built to do and whether it's still doing that work. I'm coming at this as someone who wants the show to carry the torch, not as a slogan, as a practical reality. If Star Trek has a future that isn't a total reboot, I still think the healthiest path forward is through the lane Strange New Worlds has opened up. Episodic storytelling that can take a swing one week and tell a classic Trek moral story the next. A crew you actually want to spend time with, and a captain who feels like a leader, not an attitude. That's why I'm being picky. Because when something matters, you don't wait until it's broken to talk about the hairline cracks. And the cracks I keep seeing is this shift from science fiction stories inside Star Trek to stories that feel like they were written to be Star Trek. Now, that sounds like a nitpick until you feel it in your bones as a viewer. So I'm going to walk through this by stress testing that standard. Moral problem versus clever idea against each season. Then I want to wrestle with a harder question at the very end. Even if the show wants to reverse course, can it? Structurally, creatively, with the incentives it's operating under now. Because that's where the stakes are. Season 1 to me is the cleanest version of what this show was designed to be. Episodic Star Trek with modern character arcs, new planets, new problems, different tones, but a consistent sense that the stories were built from speculative pressure, not from a format pitch. And Pike is a huge part of why it works.
I was thinking the same thing when I went through this.
Pike's foreknowledge of his own fate isn't just character backstory, it's a moral weight that bends the season. It makes the show quieter than a lot of modern franchise TV. It forces it to sit in uncertainty, which is the thing a lot of shows avoid because they think it reads as slow. Season 1 doesn't avoid it, it uses it. But the bigger thing, and this is part of what I think people talk around, Season 1 feels like it was written by people who actually wanted to tell science fiction stories, not Star Trek episodes. Science fiction stories that happen to fit inside Star Trek. That is not the same muscle. The original series didn't become iconic because it was constantly trying to remind you that it was Star Trek. It became iconic because it took speculative ideas seriously. It took them all the way to their consequences and then let the audience do the rest. You can feel that same instinct in Season 1. The M'Benga and his daughter story is arguably the cleanest example. You've got a father using the transporter buffer as stasis to keep his terminally ill child alive. That is a science fiction premise with built-in moral rot. It's a technological loophole used to avoid grief, the kind of thing a Starfleet officer would do and then hate himself for doing. And the way it resolves this is the key. It's not speech, it's not a message. It's a story consequence. An alien entity cures her, and the cost is she leaves with it permanently to live in the nebula. M'Benga gets what he wanted, and he still loses. That's science fiction. It's not a slogan. The theme comes through because the story demanded a price. And that's the difference between a theme merging and a theme being arranged. Season 1 does that repeatedly. It varies tone, sure, but it's still premise first, consequence second. Even the horror episode with the Gorn hatchlings, the one that ends with HEMMER'S sacrifice, that isn't just, look, we can do alien horror. It's structured on the cost of exploration. The show isn't pretending space is easy. HEMMER'S death sticks. It changes Uhura. It changes the ship. In a series looking to plant its flag and stakes as real and genuine, it matters. And then you have the Season 1 finale, the alternate future that shows Pike what happens if he avoids his fate. It's not just a canon toy, it's a moral trap. Pike sees that dodging his sacrifice leads to a really worse future: war, devastation, Spock being injured. The episode's literally built around a moral problem. How much personal happiness are you allowed to take if your choices make the world worse? Pike's answer's painful and quiet, and it feels earned. So if I apply the standard moral problem versus clever idea, Season 1 passes more often than it misses. The clever ideas are there: body swap comedy, pirate hijinks, genre play, but the story is still being driven by the crew meeting a premise and paying a price. That's why it feels like the closest thing to classic Trek. And it's why I think Season 1 is the baseline the show should be judged against, not because it's perfect, but because it's disciplined. Season 2 is where success starts changing, what the show thinks it is. Season 1 worked, and now the show has permission. Permission from the studio, from the audience, from itself. And you can feel the creative team lean into that permission. The range becomes a headline. The show becomes proud of its flexibility. Some of that is great. Season 2 has episodes I genuinely respect because they take a form and still land the moral core. The courtroom drama for Una is straight down the middle Star Trek in the best way. It's a Federation ideals story. It's about law and hypocrisy and what a society claims it believes versus what it practices. It's not subtle, but it's built on a moral problem and not a gimmick. And the show earns it by letting it play, letting the arguments happen. That's what classic Trek did. Put people in a room with a dilemma and let the audience sit in it. That's important. Season 2 does something else that's very interesting. It starts building episodes around character emotional breakpoints and then finds a format to expose them. You can see this in how the musical episode works. I'm not saying the musical is perfect. I'm saying the reason it works at all is because it forces confession. It takes the things characters refuse to say in a normal episode and makes them unavoidable. Spock and Chapel, La'an and Kirk. The episode isn't, we're doing a musical because we can. It's, we need characters to reveal truths they've been dodging. And the musical anomaly, that's the mechanism. That's format serving a moral and emotional problem, and still being fun. Same with the Lower Decks crossover. On paper, it's pure clever idea. Animated characters and live action, meta jokes, winks, but it still lands because it uses those characters to reflect the Enterprise crew back to themselves. It becomes the story about legacy and idealism and what it feels like to serve on a ship that's becoming myth. So Season 2 can clear the bar. But it also introduces a pressure that becomes dangerous in Season 3. It trains the audience and maybe trains the writers too to expect that every episode is going to be a thing. Not just a story, a format, a novelty, a bold swing. And the reason that becomes a problem is simple. Novelty inflates. When you do a musical once, it's an event. When you do constant events, the show becomes a parade. You stop feeling the quiet competence of the crew because the format is always louder than the people. Season 2 is still mostly in control of that. It's the hinge you can see both futures. It's also where canon play starts becoming a bigger ingredient. Kirk shows up in different ways. Time travel explanations get used to smooth timeline issues. The show is still careful, but you can feel it getting more comfortable using the franchise itself as a toy box. Again, not automatically bad, but this is where the internal argument starts, and I want to actually wrestle with it instead of pretending it isn't there. Because the show is being punished in a way for being good at what people asked for, fans wanted episodic Trek back. They wanted variety. They wanted optimism. They wanted the show to feel fun again. And Season 2 says, okay, we can do that, and we can do more, and we can prove how wide the sandbox is. So is the drift I'm describing a betrayal, or is it an inevitable evolution? I don't think it's betrayal that's too moralistic. I think it's gravity. Success changes incentives, and in franchise TV, incentives matter as much as taste. Season 3 is where the shift stops being theoretical and starts really becoming visible. Not because the show forgets how to write, not because the performances drop, not because the ambition disappears. Season 3 is still ambitious, trust me. It's still confident. It's still well-made. The problem is structural. Season 3, for me, feels like the show is being built from the outside in. Format first, concept first, franchise play first. Then the episode goes looking for the moral problem to sort of justify the shape it already chose. And that order is important. I think... Park there for a second because it matters. Because when the moral problem comes first, the science fiction creates pressure. Characters are forced to respond. Whatever choice they make, something costs them. And that cost lingers. When the clever idea comes first, the idea becomes the engine. The episode moves because the format moves. The characters move with it. And when it's over, the engine shuts off. You remember the hook, you remember the construction, you remember the execution. You don't always remember the consequence. That's the difference between discovery and recognition. In earlier seasons, you discover what an episode is about by watching characters collide with something they don't yet understand. The meaning emerges as they struggle through it. In season 3, more episodes begin with recognition. You know what kind of episode this is going to be. You know the rhythm, you know the move. Recognition changes how you watch. You stop leaning forward, you start evaluating the execution. At least that's the trap I was falling into as a reviewer. And that's where cleverness starts replacing pressure. Let's get specific because this is where abstraction kind of breaks down. Take the Holodeck murder mystery episode, okay? On paper, it's clever, it's fun. It gives the actors range. It's an homage stacked on homage, and none of that is a problem by itself. The question is, what's the moral problem? If the core of the episode is the holodeck malfunctions and traps someone, that's not a moral problem, that's a plot engine. If the core is La'an is forced to confront something about control, trust, or identity, then the episode has weight. And there are moments where it gestures in that direction, kind of like, yeah, sure. But when you step back, what sticks is the concept, the format, the funhouse mirror, if you will. The clever idea dominates memory. Now compare that to the Mbenga daughter episode in season 1. You don't remember the mechanism first. You remember the pain. You remember the choice. You remember the cost. The science fiction is the delivery system. The moral residue is what stays with you. Now, look at the documentary style episode with Ortega's brother. Okay, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Again, clever format. Again, well unintended. Again, parts of it work because they're anchored in Ortega's trauma and her brother's fear? ? But the episode is self-consciously about Starfleet. It's presenting values. It's defending the institution. Classic Trek reveals Starfleet by putting it under pressure in a new situation. This episode explains Starfleet by framing it. There's a difference between being shown a value and watching a value tested. Season 3 does test values sometimes. This isn't an absolute, but the balance shifts. More episodes feel like showcases, and showcases are fun until they become the default. Now add in the escalation of arcs. The Gorn resolution, Batali's sacrifice, the Vesda storyline, deep-cut canon elements, Trelane, implied Q connections, early holodeck justification. That's a lot of signal. And this is where diminishing returns begin to creep in, even for viewers who can't articulate why. And it's not that the show is less clever. It might be more clever. It's that cleverness starts replacing the quiet confidence of premise and consequence. The show begins to feel like it's doing Star Trek. Musical, crossover, courtroom drama, documentary, noir holodeck, Vulcan transformation comedy, arena mirror, Metron callback. It's impressive as a checklist. But as a viewing experience, it starts to feel bigger than the people inside it. The show begins performing itself. That's the copy of a copy problem. When you're writing science fiction that fits inside Star Trek, you start with what if and let the professionals solve it under pressure. When you're writing Star Trek, you start with what kind of Star Trek episode haven't we done yet? That second approach, it creates noise. And noise eventually makes things feel cheap, even when the budget is high, because the show stops acting like it has something to discover and starts acting like it has something to demonstrate. think it's a great question to look at. This is where I don't want to pretend it's simple. There are definitely structural constraints, real ones, genuinely. The show is limited to 10 episodes a season. The creative team has said they generate more ideas than ultimately there are slots. That creates pressure to spend your best bullets now. Season 3 also had the strike disruption, scripts locked early, less ability to adjust midstream, and that tends to make episodes feel more designed, less discovered. There's also the timeline problem. The show's driving toward a known handoff. Pike's story has an end. The showrunners have talked about pushing into the brink of TOS. There's a plan, there's a destination. And when a story has a destination, writers start thinking in terms of moves. Moves are not the same as stories. Moves create events, stories create residue. So even if everyone agrees with my thesis, even if the writers wake up tomorrow and say, we need more science fiction premises, fewer format showcases, the machine around them still pushes toward bigger, louder, more marketable episode identities. And that's the internal argument. Maybe what I'm calling drift is just the cost of modern television, the cost of streaming, the cost of budgets, the cost of episode scarcity, the cost of trying to make every hour worth a week of social conversation. Episodic restraint might be harder to sell now. But here's the counterpoint, and this is where I land. If Strange New Worlds cannot sustain episodic restraint, if it cannot sustain premise-first science fiction storytelling, then it cannot carry the torch. Because that torch is not the logo, it's not the uniform, it's not the deep-cut cameos, it's the ability to take speculative ideas seriously and let competent people face moral consequence without turning it into a show about itself. That's the real inheritance. So what does this mean going into season 4? Not predictions, not a wish list, not fan fiction, practical recalibration. First, the show really needs to make the moral problem the driver again. Not in every episode. You can still swing, you can still do a weird one, but the default should be premise-first science fiction stories that are uncomfortable and specific. Second, the show should trust competence again. One of the reasons Pike works is that he's a captain who feels like an adult. He's compassionate, but he's not indulgent. He's calm without being passive. That tone is so very important. When the show becomes a series of showcases, competence can get lost because the episode is busy performing its format. Third, the show needs fewer episodes that feel like they were written to prove Star Trek can do a thing. The show already proved it. A musical happened. A live-action animation crossover happened. A documentary framing happened. A noir holodeck thing happened. The question is not, can you do it? The question is, does it add residue? Does it change the crew? Does it create moral cost? Fourth, and this is where I'm going to be a little hard on it, the show needs to stop using self-awareness as a substitute for meaning. A reference is not a story. A deep cut is not a dilemma. A franchise wink is not a consequence. Those are spices. They are not food. And the more the show leans on them, the more it trains its audience to watch for the wrong thing. It trains them to watch for recognition instead of discovery. And discovery is the whole point. I'm not doing a score for this video, obviously. I'm not calling season 3 trash. I'm not pretending season 2 didn't have some of the boldest episodes the franchise has ever attempted. I'm saying the show is approaching a point where it has to decide what kind of success it wants. Does it want to be the Star Trek show that proves Star Trek can do any genre, any format, any stunt? Or does it want to be the Star Trek show that carries the core craft forward? Science fiction premise, moral pressure, competence, consequence, and allows it all, the experimentation, to serve that instead of replacing it. Because those are not the same show. And here's the part I wanted to leave you with, not as a neat wrap up, but as sort of it's a tension I'm gonna let you sit in for just a minute. If season 4 starts and the episodes keep feeling like showcases, even really well-made ones, then this drift is not a phase, it's the new identity. If that happens, the franchise loses the one show that still felt like it was discovering the future instead of performing the past. So when season 4 begins, I'm not watching for the big swing. I'm watching for the first episode that proves the writers are still starting with what if and letting the meaning show up the hard way. Because that's the difference. Star Trek and a copy of Star Trek. That's what separates those things. And we're closer to that line than people want to admit. So there you go. Now you know. If knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. Sound off in the comments below. What do you think? Is there a future for Trek? Is it in the room with us now? Whatever your thoughts, I would absolutely love to hear them. So please jump down below and let's have that conversation. I hope you guys are digging sort of the ideas that I'm putting forward, because I can't wait to really start exploring a little deeper those thoughts moving forward into season 4. Comment below again. I'd love to hear your comments, and if there's any questions you have you want me to answer, or maybe some thoughts I should probably address, I would absolutely love to see those as well. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again real soon. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all. Bye, guys.